housing, asylum seekers get housing, and they get preferential housing before the Dutch indigenous people. So who is discriminating who? And people are really angered about that.
In a passionate speech last week, Geert Wilders, the leader of the Party for Freedom in the Netherlands, demanded immediate action to address the escalating immigration crisis affecting both the Netherlands and Europe at large.
Now, votes in the general election in the Netherlands are still being counted, but it seems that the veteran anti-Islam politician Geert Wilders has led his PVV party to the largest share of the vote. PVV, which translates into English as freedom, is set to take around 35 of the 150 seats. That won't be enough to govern alone, and several other parties have said they won't enter a coalition with the far-right Mr. Wilders. He says the people want him to be Prime Minister.
Luister, de kiezer heeft nu gesproken.
The voters have spoken. The voters have determined that the PVV will become the largest party by far. It would be very undemocratic. And so I assume that it will not happen, that voters will be sidelined. Voters wouldn't accept that either. They'd find it terrible. I think we need to see where the common ground is, and then we need to do business with each other. Because we have to help the Netherlands move forwards. The hope of so many people is that things must change in the Netherlands, that the influx of asylum seekers will be limited, that ordinary Dutch people will have more money in their pockets again, that homes will go back to the Dutch, that the Dutch will be put in the first place again.
Well, we can go live now to our correspondent Anna Holligan in The Hague. And Anna, let's just take a step back and take stock of this moment. Just how significant is this result for the Netherlands?
Seismic, and there's no doubt the tremors will be felt in Brussels this morning. This result is a headache. If he actually manages to go ahead and become Prime Minister, to convince enough parties to work with him in coalition, it will be an absolute nightmare for the European Union. This is the Prime Minister's office just behind me here in the Dutch Parliament. The big question is who will be occupying it in a few months' time. That's as long as it could take in order to negotiate a new government. You heard Geert Wilders there talk about some of the issues that have really dominated this campaign. So, for example, migration, but talked about in pragmatic rather than inflammatory terms. The cost of living crisis, a new term, bestaanszekerheid, the security of existence, the shortage of affordable homes. And actually, during the last few days, his party surged in the polls. And if you are not familiar with Geert Wilders, he's a radical politician. He's been in Parliament for around 25 years. He's anti-Islam, anti-immigration, but we've already had a kind of indication that he may be prepared to compromise in order to convince enough parties to go into coalition with him. And you mentioned 35 seats there. We've just had an update. It's looking as though he has managed to secure 37 seats in Parliament, about 2.3 million votes. That, to put it in context, is more than the VVD, the Conservative Liberal Party of Mark Rutte, secured in the last two elections. So to say seismic is perhaps even an understatement here.
Yes, Anna, and a big challenge for the other parties in the Netherlands, because as you mentioned there, they've shunned Mr. Wilders over the years, over the decades. They now have to decide whether to support him in forming a government because he does have the popular vote, it seems.
Exactly as you say, Catherine. So that will be the real challenge now, because as Geert Wilders said last night, he can no longer be isolated, he can no longer be ignored. And if the other mainstream parties do that, they will once again be accused of ignoring the very disenfranchised, marginalised people who voted for him in the first place. There's been a huge crisis of trust in Dutch politics. He has promised to restore that. And what's really telling is that all of the coalition parties lost votes. This is a huge punishment for the coalition, whereas the populist parties, they surged. So not just Geert Wilders' PVV Freedom Party, but also a newly formed New Social Contract Party led by Peter Omtzigt. He managed to secure, it looks like, around 20 seats. And then on the other side of the political spectrum, reflecting a polarised society, we have the Green Left Labour Alliance led by Frans Timmermans, who gave up a European Commission job to come back and lead this bloc, has also performed well. To explain what happens next, if Geert Wilders is unsuccessful in forming a new coalition, then the responsibility will fall to the next biggest party, which is looking like the Green Left Labour Alliance.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent in The Hague there, Anna Holligan.
Islam is an influential ideology that fosters hatred and terror, fundamentally incompatible with Dutch values. We must close our borders immediately to asylum seekers and immigrants from Islamic countries. It's time to withdraw from the Schengen Agreement and reinstate our own border controls, Wilders declared.
Io penso che ci sia un problema di compatibilità tra la cultura islamica o certa interpretazione della cultura islamica.
The biggest threats to our survival today and the threats to our freedom are the European Union, mass immigration, and this terrible Islamic ideology of submission and violence.
known for his contentious stance on immigration should his party come into power. Following his fervent speech advocating sweeping changes to immigration policy, Wilders report a notable rise in threats and attacks from Islamist groups and individuals. We should start by dismantling Islamic institutions such as mosques, beginning with foreign-funded mosques, including those under the influence of Diyanet, the Turkish Ministry of Religious Affairs, Wilders asserted.
Geert Wilders' short film Fitna became an international sensation on the internet last year. It shows acts of Islamic terrorism next to violent verses from the Quran. Wilders, a Dutch parliament member and leader of the Freedom Party, has been one of the most outspoken opponents of what some call the Islamization of the Netherlands. Wilders has called Islam retarded. He's compared it to Nazism and the Quran to Hitler's Mein Kampf. And now he could be sent to jail for it. Last week, a Dutch court ordered that Wilders stand trial for hate speech. A lot of Muslims in the world would like to kill Geert Wilders. He's lived for the past 4 years under state protection, with a death threat over his head, and with a number of Islamic nations around the world wanting to put him on trial for blasphemy. And because of the tight security around Wilders, we were only able to film him in an interview setting. What was the purpose of the film Fitna?
Our country in the Netherlands, as many other European countries, is based on Christianity, is based on Judaism, is even based on humanism, but not on Islam. And this is what I wanted to show people, not by using actors, but by using real images and real verses from the Quran, that the Quran is not just an old book from 1500 years ago. It's a book that is still very alive today, and people get a lot of wrong incentives from it today. So I wanted to warn the people, and I was quite successful. Whatever you may think about Fitna in the Netherlands, more than 3 million people watched it after 24 hours, and worldwide more than 20 million people watched it after 2 weeks.
I'm sure that people who've watched you provoke Muslims over the years wonder if you have a death wish. Are you secretly daring Muslims to try to kill you?
No, and I'm not even provoking them, as you said. I try to warn the people in the Netherlands and maybe even abroad in Western societies about the actual danger that Islam brings to our society and to our freedom.
Do you believe that a moderate or democratic Islam can exist?
No, I don't believe in it. I think there is no European Islam, there is no moderate Islam. Islam is, as I see it, a fascist ideology full of hatred, submission, and anything else that we should fight against. However, I make a distinction between the ideology, I believe Islam is more an ideology than a religion, and the people. There are, of course, people, Muslims. I have nothing against Muslims who are not terrorists, who are the majority of the Muslims in my country are law-abiding people, are not terrorists at all.
I've heard you call Islamic culture retarded.
It is a culture of backwardness, of retardedness, of barbarism.
You've been called a racist. Do you believe in the superiority of whites?
No, of course not. I'm not a racist. I'm not even in contact with countries like, parties like the British National Party who believe in black and white. I'm a Democrat, full stop.
In your speech to the Parliament a few days ago, you referred to Muslim colonists. What did you mean?
Well, people that are coming to the Netherlands to stir up problems, or who are in the Netherlands, sometimes they are even born in the Netherlands, the younger generation, and their parents or their grandparents were born here. They are not here to integrate, but to dominate. And they don't give them, excuse my words, for all the criticism and all the culture that we have in the Netherlands today. That's why I call them colonists. There are people living here from Morocco for 30 years who don't speak one word of Dutch.
So you see Islam growing, you see a government that you believe doesn't care enough. Where is the Netherlands headed on this issue?
The biggest problem we face today is that the dominant political culture is one of cultural relativism. Most of the political elite and political parties really do believe in cultural relativism, really do believe that all cultures are equal. Whereas I believe they are not equal. I believe the Christian and the Judaist culture is far better, and I'm not ashamed to say it. And I'm not a racist to say that the Christian culture is a better one than the Islamic culture. There's an enormous gap between the political elite and the Vox Populi. And they see that our country is changing. They see in their streets, in their neighborhoods, in their cities, in their villages, they see that it's often not the Netherlands anymore. They feel that they live in little Morocco or little Turkey. We have an Islamic intifada today. I'm not exaggerating. In many, many cities and villages of the Netherlands, this is the problem. And the government looks in the other direction and ignores it, puts it under the carpet, all the problems.
Are you tired of living with a death threat over your head?
Well, not tired, but sometimes, not sometimes. I wish I didn't have.
Anyone who threatens or uses violence should be incarcerated or deported from our country. Furthermore, we must take preemptive measures against hundreds of supporters and thousands of sympathisers of the jihadist movement in the Netherlands, he added. Wilders, a long-standing critic of Islam and mass migration, has faced threats and physical assaults from extremists over the years. Yet the intensity of the backlash escalated significantly after he outlined plans to curb Muslim immigration and expel individuals involved in criminal activities or supporting extremist ideologies.
Well, one thing we do know ahead of Mike Pence's speech is that the slogan for today is Making America First again, a sign of the populist right-wing message at this convention, which of course has many foreign visitors. Amongst those here are Nigel Farage, the leader of the UK Independence Party, and joining me now, Geert Wilders of the Dutch Freedom Party. Welcome to you. You describe yourself as the next Dutch Prime Minister. Why are you here?
Well, I'm invited by a friendly politician from Tennessee that I know for a very long time. And of course, it's the heart of the American democracy. We know since yesterday who the candidate will be of one of the two parties in the United States. And to be here is I'm very honored to be here and to focus.
I mean, that nationalist message, yes. Making America great again, America first, yeah. That accords with your view for your country of the Netherlands.
Well, you know, not only my view. I think that what you see happening today in the United States is quite similar to what we see all over Europe. We see that a growing amount of people feel misrepresented, feel even abandoned by their political leaders, the political elite today. They see problems every day when it comes to losing their jobs, or terrorism, or immigration, or Islamization, or crime, even often on a daily basis. And they see that the current leaders are not addressing it, are still being very politically correct. And now we have a leader, I hope he will be the next president of the United States, that says, well, I'm not being politically correct. I'm going to address all those issues. And the normal people, what the Americans call the blue-collar people, are very enthusiastic about that. And you see in Europe, with my party and other countries, the rise of similar parties as well.
You would agree with what Donald Trump now calls his suggestion of banning all Muslims coming into the United States?
Well, you know, I think, and I have to agree with that kind of policy. I believe that not all Muslims are bad people, but I believe that the Islam is something that goes not together with liberty and with freedom. And we have, with this open door policy of the last decades in all of Europe, we have, without having any demands of assimilation and integration, because of this political correctness of the millions of people who came to our society. And I always tell my American friends, if you let Islam being seated on your soil, don't be surprised that you will harvest Sharia law.
But, I mean, there are more than 1 billion Muslims in the world. Can we keep them out of North America or indeed Western Europe?
Well, I think we have to. Once again, not because all those people are bad people. It would be ridiculous to suggest that all Muslims are terrorists, but almost all terrorists are Muslims today. You cannot close your eyes for that. So indeed, I would, if I would become the Prime Minister of the Netherlands next year, after I would win the elections, close the Dutch borders for immigrants from Islamic countries immediately.
You'd only be able to do that, of course, if you followed Britain out of the European Union.
Exactly. I mean, in order, we transferred our sovereign rights, not only when it comes to our monetary policy or our budgetary policy, but also our immigration policy. We transfer that to Brussels. So we have to regain our sovereignty.
So you would hold a referendum?
We would hold a referendum in the Netherlands for what we call an exit, the Dutch leaving, in order to be able to toughen up our immigration policies. It cannot be done, and it will not be done by Brussels and the European Union. You have to become a sovereign nation again in order to do that.
What about Muslim people already in Holland? I mean, Holland, you have a history of colonialism like we do, which includes people of that religious faith. What do you do about them?
Listen, if people are in the Netherlands already, and if they abide by our laws and our constitution, they are not only free to stay, but equal as anybody else.
But you regard them as a threat nonetheless?
No, not the people. I regret, or I see the Islamic ideology as a threat. I see it more as a totalitarian ideology than a religion. So if the people abide by our laws, they are welcome to stay. But if they, as they often unfortunately do, if they start acting according to Sharia law and commit crimes, and they have a double nationality, I believe we should strip them of the Dutch nationality and send them packing. It's the only way to deal with
Dutch
it.
people commit crimes as well. Will you strip them of their nationality?
Well, they have only one nationality. That will be very hard to do. Most of the people from Islamic countries in Holland have, for instance, the Moroccans, one of the biggest community, have double nationality. And I'm sure that there is so much support that if you abide by our laws, you are welcome to stay. We will close the door for new immigrants from Islamic countries. If you are here and you abide by laws, you're welcome. But if you commit a crime, if you start acting like Sharia law, then there is no room for you in a free society. We have to defend our freedom and the liberty and the safety of our children.
Do you not feel that you and perhaps Donald Trump are exploiting fear and encouraging division in our societies?
No, we are not exploiting fear. You know, we are defending the freedom of our people, and all those correct politicians that in the last decades with their open border policy let everybody come, like I said, without even the demand of assimilation in a society. In Holland today, to give you one example, 73% of all Muslims in Holland believe that Dutch Muslims who go to fight in Syria are to be considered heroes. We cannot afford that. People have not been integrated or assimilated. So I say, the good people, of course, can stay. But let's stop the Islamization of our free societies in order to stay free and liberal societies.
What do you make of the people here who are describing you as a Donald Trump lookalike?
Well, maybe it's because of my hair, I don't know. I'm not a Donald Trump. I'm just Geert Wilders.
I mean, you're very different. You've been in politics a long time.
I've been in politics.
He's a fresh arrival.
He's an outsider. He's an outsider, and he's, I think, very popular for that reason as well. I had a burger here at a hamburger shop. I will not mention the name, and I asked the lady who was giving me the Big Mac, I told her, are you going to vote? And she said, I think she was 25 years old, she said, for the first time I registered to vote because I want to vote for Mr. Trump. And without him I probably would not have voted, but certainly not for the Republican Party. And I believe that if you manage to get people in the political process to vote, you are doing a very good thing indeed.
Geert Wilders, thank you very much indeed.
Let's request that all schools, newspapers and media outlets display a Mohammed cartoon, not to provoke, but to show that we refuse to yield to threats and violence, and that we stand firm in supporting our freedoms, Wilders urged. They want to silence and intimidate me, to deter me from our mission to reclaim our country, Wilders declared to supporters at a recent rally. But I will not yield, I will not be silenced. We will continue to fight regardless of the challenges. One of the most alarming incidents occurred shortly after Wilders' speech, when a package containing suspicious white powder was delivered to his residence. Law enforcement quickly responded, determining the substance to be harmless. Nevertheless, the accompanying note made clear the potential consequences if he continued down his current path.
In Jerusalem, MK Dr. Aryeh Eldad held an international conference on defeating jihad today, bringing leaders from around the world who are fighting the Islamization of their countries.
The true question that is facing us today is there a moderate Islam?
My starting assumption that there is a grave threat that has risen in the world. It threatens civilization itself.
The people who express their belief that they represent the true Islam, and the true nature of Islam is what is represented by this global jihad that we fight today.
A conference was held in Jerusalem titled Facing Jihad. The conference was organized by MK Dr. Aryeh Eldad, and it related to the current worldwide threat posed by Islamic holy war, jihad, and what can be done against it.
I was invited by Dr. Eldad and others to give a speech here about the Islamization of the West, indeed also of Europe, and to show my short movie Fitna that was broadcasted in March of this year. And indeed is about the true face as I see the Quran and the Islam as a violent ideology that doesn't want to integrate or assimilate, but wants to submit and want to rule over all the kafirs and non-Muslims.
It's my view that the world, not just Israel, but the world faces a grave threat, and that it is important that this threat be identified. The threat I'm calling Islamic totalitarianism.
Only a few weeks ago, the world could learn just another bloody lesson from the Islam in Mumbai, India. The true nature of Islam expressed itself again as if we needed another lesson after 9/11, after London, Madrid, after Russia, after Baghdad, after the 90 years of bloody struggle against Islam in the land of Israel.
Islam indeed it has symbols, religious symbols, but it's an ideology. It rules everything, not only from birth to death, but everything in between, everything in life. It's an ideology. So I believe Islam should not be compared with Judaism or Christianity, but with other totalitarian ideologies like communism or fascism. And this is what we are dealing with.
Attendees came from around the world, including Europe and the United States, and attempted to identify not only the practical dangers of terrorism, but the ideological underpinnings which facilitate this threat.
And I used in Fitna no actors, but I used certain surahs from verses of the Quran combined with real images of things that are happening and that happen in the world.
We fail to recognize the all-embracing nature of Islam and its direct connections to state power. And of course we fail to recognize the threat to free speech, for example, that this poses. In nations where Islam is triumphant, it is against the law to speak against the ideology of the state, and the ideology of the state is Islam.
My message today, and that's why I'm so proud to be in Jerusalem, is that indeed your fight against jihad is our fight against jihad. It's not a territorial conflict. It's an ideological conflict.
While countries throughout the world are dealing with the threat of terrorism, it was accepted by the conference that Israel is in a uniquely dangerous position, with the potential for an Islamic state to be set up on her doorstep.
It's not a territorial conflict. You can give away everything that you have. I wouldn't do it. I would not advocate it. The contrary. But you will never get peace, because the ideology, in the Islamic ideology, there is no room for anything else but Islam, not for Jews, not for Christians, not for anything else.
Interestingly, here in Israel, you face a problem we don't face in the United States, which is the possibility of an Islamic state right on your borders. I stand firmly opposed to the creation of a Palestinian state.
So if there would be no Israel, and God forbid that will ever happen, there still would be a jihad, and it would be faced towards us. And only because Israeli parents send their children to face the jihad.
In addition to physical threats, Wilders has been subjected to widespread online harassment and abuse. His social media platforms have been inundated with accusations of racism, bigotry and fascism, with many users vowing retribution for his proposed crackdown on immigration. The level of hostility is unprecedented, remarked Bart Nejman, a spokesperson for the Party for Freedom. They're attempting to drown out our message, to discredit us in the eyes of the public, but we will not be silenced. We will continue to speak the truth regardless of the price. Wilders himself acknowledged the emotional toll of the threats on himself and his family. My wife and children live in fear, he confessed in a recent interview. We're constantly on guard, wary of those who wish us harm. It's a heavy burden. Despite the escalating attacks, Wilders remains resolute. He's committed to advancing his party's agenda to reform the Netherlands' immigration policies, even if it means exposing himself and his loved ones to greater risks.
Our keynote speaker today, Geert Wilders, personifies, get cheer, I want to cheer, woohoo! That's right, he came all the way from Holland. Oh my God. Listen, I'm gonna cut my introduction, but this man is my hero, Geert Wilders.
Thank you, Pamela. Ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying, no mosque here. Exactly. May I ask you to be silent for 10 seconds? Just be silent and listen for 10 seconds. What we hear here in New York are the sounds of life of the greatest city on earth. No place in the world, no place in human history is as vibrant and dynamic as New York City. You hear the cars, you hear the cars, you hear the people, you hear them rushing to their various destinations, you hear the sounds of business in New York, but it would be like Mecca. Mecca, a city without freedom. Whatever your religion, your persuasion, or your gender is, in New York you will find a home. But in Mecca, if your religion is not Islam, you are not even welcome to enter the city. Ladies and gentlemen, Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf, who by the way is not a moderate, this Imam claims the right to build a mosque, a house of Sharia, here on this hallowed ground. But friends, my friends, but we have not forgotten. That is why we are here today, to draw the line here today on this sacred spot. We are here. We are here today in the spirit of America's founding fathers. We are here today in the spirit of freedom. We are here today in the spirit of President Abraham Lincoln, who freed the slaves. And President Lincoln, he said, and let me quote, "Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves." And these important words are key to our survival. The tolerance that is crucial to our freedom requires a line of defense. And Mayor Bloomberg uses tolerance as an argument to allow...
I'm not afraid, Wilders asserted. I will not be silenced, no matter how fierce the threats become. We're fighting for our nation's future, and we won't retreat. The time for talk has passed, Wilders declared to an enthusiastic crowd of supporters. Our nation, our way of life, is threatened by uncontrolled mass immigration. We can no longer afford to be passive. Wilders began by highlighting demographic shifts in the Netherlands, noting the significant rise in the foreign-born population. We're becoming a minority in our own country, he lamented.
Imam Rauf and his sponsors to build the so-called Cordoba Mosque. But Mayor Bloomberg, your mayor, he forgets, however, that openness can never be open-ended. A tolerant society is not a suicidal society. A tolerant society like your city, New York, must defend itself against the powers of darkness, the forces and survive. And this means that we must never give a free hand to those who want to subjugate us. Ladies and gentlemen, an overwhelming majority of Americans is opposed to building this mosque. But so is an overwhelming majority of people everywhere in the non-Islamic world. Because we do realize what is at stake here. We know what this so-called Cordoba Mosque really means. Imam Raouf maintains that American secular law and Sharia law are based on the same principles. Imam Raouf refuses to condemn terrorists because he says that terrorism, I quote, is a very complex question. He says, and I quote again Imam Raouf, that America is an accessory to the crime that happened on 9/11. In fact, Imam Raouf said, in the most direct sense, I quote him again, Osama bin Laden is made in the USA. And terrorism will only end if the West acknowledges the harm it has done to Muslims. Ladies and gentlemen, this crazy and idiotic remarks of this extreme imam proves that this man should never play the game he has in mind here in Manhattan. His blame the West, blame America message is an insult. Americans, and by extension, all of us, whose civilization was also attacked on 9/11/2001, are not to blame for what happened here 9 years ago. And Osama bin Laden is not made in the USA. And the West has never harmed Islam before Islam has harmed us all the time, centuries over and over again. And that should stop. Most Americans do not want this so-called Cordoba mosque to be built here because they understand that it's not only a provocation, but it's also a humiliation. They understand the triumphant narrative of a mosque named after the great mosque of Cordoba, which was constructed where a Christian cathedral stood before that land was conquered by Islam. And an overwhelming majority of Americans is opposed to building an Islamic mosque close to Ground Zero. There is no lack of mosques in New York. The contrary, dozens of buildings where Muslims can pray. It's not about the lack of space for prayer. It's about the symbolic meaning, and we should not allow that to happen here. Indeed. No mosque here.
The Party for Freedom leader also criticised the Dutch government's open-door immigration policies, which he claimed facilitated the infiltration of radical ideologies and anti-Western sentiments. We've welcomed those who disdain our freedom, democracy and Judeo-Christian heritage, Wilders asserted, and now we're paying the price. Wilders then outlined his party's strategy for addressing the crisis if elected. First and foremost, we'll halt all Muslim immigration to the Netherlands, he pledged. No more Syrian refugees, Turkish guest workers or Moroccan economic migrants. We'll seal our borders and regain control over who enters our country. Furthermore, Wilders vowed to deport any immigrants, including those with Dutch citizenship, engaged in criminal activities or supporting extremist ideologies. We won't allow our streets to be overrun by those intent on our destruction, he declared. They'll be sent back without exception. The Party for Freedom leader also advocated for a comprehensive overhaul of the Netherlands' social welfare system, arguing that it had been exploited by immigrants who sought to take advantage of generous benefits. The era of free rides is over, Wilders proclaimed. If you wish to live in the Netherlands, you'll work, pay taxes and respect our laws and customs. Wilders concluded his speech by urging supporters to join him in reclaiming their country. He pledged that if elected, his party would swiftly implement these measures to address the immigration crisis, despite potential opposition from the European Union and other international bodies. We're fighting for the soul of the Netherlands, Wilders declared. We won't back down regardless of the cost. The speech has already sparked considerable controversy within the Netherlands and across Europe. Critics accused Wilders of promoting xenophobia and exploiting public fears for political gain. However, his supporters argue that he's simply voicing the concerns of ordinary citizens who feel abandoned by their government. With the Netherlands gearing up for its next general election, immigration is expected to be a pivotal issue. And with Wilders and the Party for Freedom promising drastic action, the stakes are higher than ever. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and for more content like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel.